A few weeks ago, my boyfriend and I went to go see a movie together at our local cinema. I can't remember what movie we saw, but I think it was Annabelle. Eventually, during the movie, I got up to go get some of that addictive, overpriced popcorn at the concession stand. While I was waiting in line, I noticed a man looking in my direction from another line. He was an older man, I'd say maybe around his 30s. I really thought nothing of it, as there were some creeps around the area, so I was pretty used to people like this. Anyway, I got the popcorn for me and my boyfriend and started making my way towards the screening room. I, for some reason, looked behind me and saw the man walking behind me. Not wanting to be rude and give him a sign that I was creeped out by him, I kept my distance and casually walked the rest of the way to the screening room. I went back to my seat and told my boyfriend about the man. He said not to worry about it and to just leave him alone. So, fast forward about an hour later, the movie had ended and we had walked out of the theater and started walking towards our car. It was very dark out, so there were no lights around and it was hard to see. As we were walking to the car, my boyfriend put his arm in front of me to block me from moving. I asked my boyfriend what was wrong, but he just stayed there staring in the direction of our car. I noticed that his eyes were open wide as if he were scared. I looked to the car, and in the back seat, I could see someone in our car. So I of course start freaking out and telling my boyfriend to run. My boyfriend called the police, and when they arrived, we told them everything and they got the man out of the car. However, there was something familiar about the man. That's when it hit me. It was the exact same man that followed me. He was arrested and was taken away. I have absolutely no idea as to how he got in our car, but I'm sure I don't want to know. I was 15 when this happened, and this still haunts me till this day. Let me explain. I was at home on a Friday, I believe, and I had just finished up some homework and looking forward tomorrow to hang out with a few friends. I was on my phone talking with my friend when all of a sudden, a number that I didn't know called. The call was coming from the state of Idaho. I answered it and thought it was a scam call, but I was dead wrong. I asked, "Hello?" in a confused tone. I then heard what sounded like a child, I'd say around 9 or 10, say something along the lines of, "Help, please. I've been kidnapped for 2 years." I felt my blood turn to ice as he said this. He said his kidnapper was outside doing something, so he called for help. I told him to call 911 immediately and to explain the situation. He said he wanted to, but afraid his kidnapper would find out. I told him I would call for him. I asked for his name, but before he could tell me, I heard him scream in fear, and then the phone hung up. I immediately called 911 and explained everything. I gave the police the number the boy had called from. I explained to my parents, and the police ended up coming to our house for questioning. A few weeks later, the police had told us that the number led to a house in Idaho. Unfortunately, they told us they did not find the kidnapper. I still don't know whatever became of the boy until my mom brought it up to me a few years later. She said the police told her something that I never knew about. What she told me will always haunt me. The cops had told her that they found the boy dead close to a nearby river in a wooded area. The boy had cuts on his face and he was brutally tortured. Whenever I see on the news that a child or anybody who has gone missing or found dead, I still think of that little boy.
This story happened to me on my first day of high school. I remember walking down my street in the morning toward the bus stop. There were a few other kids that stood next to me talking. There was also a man who definitely didn't belong at a high school bus stop. He was tall, had a shaved head, a mustache, and a white tank top on. I thought he looked weird and out of place, but I really didn't give it a second thought. My first day of high school actually went fine. It was on the way home where it all went wrong. I got on the school bus. I saw the same man from this morning sat on the back of the bus. This time he was staring right at me. I didn't know then, and I still don't know now, how this guy even got on the bus in the first place. The house I lived in was one of the last stops, so by the time my stop arrived, most of the kids have gotten off the bus, and the bus was empty. I could just feel that guy staring at me the whole bus ride home, though I didn't dare to look behind me and check. When my stop finally arrived, I got off and I started walking. And of course that creepy man got off and started following me. I started walking faster. And as I did, the man got faster, and that continued right down my street. The faster I walked, the faster he would. It got to the point where I needed to start running. Thankfully, my house was close by. I ran by my house and slammed the door shut, and I looked through the kitchen window to see if the man was still chasing me. He was walking past my house like nothing ever happened, while staring at me. Later that night, I was upstairs in my bedroom when someone knocked at the door, the downstairs door. The next thing I heard was my mom calling me downstairs. When I get there, my mom is looking confused and checking around outside. I say to her, "Yeah, Mom?" She said, "That's weird. There was a man just here asking to speak to you." I asked what he looked like, and she described the same man who chased me home earlier that day. I told my mom about what happened, and how I was pretty sure it was the same guy who knocked at the door. My mother told the police and our school. And actually, this wasn't the first time they have heard reports of this. The school and the police said they had several reports of the man stalking their children. From what I know, he was never caught. Who knows what he could be doing right now? Just be careful.
In the early 2000s, I became a sheriff's deputy in a small rural town, where I'd grown up most of my life. I was quite young and immature, but I responded to many calls which, over time, taught me a lot about people and life. One call, though, deeply changed my life, and forever affected how I would look at the world. It all started around 8 p.m. when I received a call from my dispatcher, notifying me of an individual who was in distress. The caller was described as an elderly woman who lived alone and was concerned about aliens that were outside her window, trying to steal her cats. Being the closest one in the area, I took the call, preparing to deal with the issue. I received multiple calls similar to this one before, and they were usually a prank or a mentally ill individual who needed some help. I might have even laughed a bit at this as I drove to the scene, thinking of how silly it would be for aliens to fly across the galaxy only to break into someone's home to steal their cats. I arrived at the property sometime after 8 and slowly made my way onto a private gravel road, which led to a large house a few hundred feet into the distance. It was this huge, secluded property with lots of grass and shrubs, but I could definitely make out a couple of lit windows on the second floor. As I made my way closer, I came upon a fence in the middle of the road that blocked my car, so I had to continue on foot. I walked for a minute or two, all the while scanning my surroundings for potential burglars, or so-called aliens, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. As I continued, something strange started to happen to me. I began to feel this warm, tingling sensation emanating from my body, as if a pot of hot water were being steamed away from inside my chest. I also began to smell this heavy metallic odor, sort of like if old pennies were mixed with chlorine. I paused to catch my breath and to think about why I was feeling this way, when suddenly, this huge glowing object appeared from the backside of the house. I froze in shock and every possible thought raced through my mind at once. The object descended over the roof, where it silently hovered for a few seconds, and then it made its way to the front of the house, where it remained floating a couple of feet above the ground. It looked like an orange hockey puck that was stretched out vertically to make space for whatever might have been inside. At this point, I felt my throat starting to burn, and I began to cough. I immediately attempted to let the dispatcher know what I was seeing, but my radio was going crazy with static thumps and whatnot. Out of nowhere, I saw this bright flash, which caused my brain to feel like it was exploding. I woke up back in my patrol car, which was stuck at the front gate. I looked around wondering how the heck I got here. I felt extremely nauseous and stumbled out of my car in a daze. I was clearly just standing next to the house a second ago. I looked around for any signs of the object I'd seen, but it was as if it disappeared into thin air. I then noticed that my dispatcher was calling me on the radio, so I quickly responded. She inquired as to why I wasn't answering her for the past 20 minutes, which startled and confused me even more. I told her that I spoke with her only 2 minutes ago as I approached the house, but she insisted that we did not speak for almost half an hour. I couldn't remember anything after approaching the home, but when I talked to the elderly woman who lived there, she claimed that she saw me from her bedroom window, falling to the ground and being approached by these short, alien beings. She also claimed to have been abducted by them many times before, and to have been taken to a dimly lit room to be scanned. For days after the incident, I was told every possible explanation under the sun, and experienced strange looks to whoever I told it to. I've since realized not to involve it in my personal or professional life. I did, however, have a few nightmares about the whole encounter, scenes where these alien-looking beings were talking to me. But to this day, I'm not 100% sure what happened that night. All I know for a fact is that I am missing approximately 20 minutes of my time.
Me and my family moved from West Palm Beach, Florida to a suburban area outside of Denver, Colorado. We had planned on moving years ago, and we did so as it was getting really expensive to live in Florida no matter where you were. My parents liked Colorado as that's where most of my family lived, and they had also found a really good school for me to go to which had great ratings. I'm not going to mention the name of the school for privacy reasons, but let's just say that it was a fairly new school. It was about 5 miles from our new house, so I could practically walk there without having to rely on any sort of transportation. The new school was far better than the one I originally went to. Nicer students, nicer teachers, and it was very easy for me to talk to new friends. There was one of my teachers, who we'll call Mr. Smith, who was my math teacher, who I really made a great connection with. I hated math, who doesn't, but Mr. Smith made math a lot more fun. He'd be willing to help people in class no matter how many times someone asked, and I'd also like to mention that he was hands down one of the best teachers throughout the school. I only wish I still had him as a teacher after what happened this one day. It was a Friday, which just so happened to be the last day before spring break. I was in my second to last class with my English teacher when our principal came on the speaker and told the school that this was a code red, and that all students should get inside the classroom immediately. I'm pretty sure no one in my class has ever been in a real lockdown before, so we were all huddled in the corner. A few people were so scared that they actually started to cry, thinking they were going to get harmed. My teacher told everyone to be quiet and to not make any noise for any reason. It felt like an eternity sitting in the corner, waiting for the all clear. However, I then began to hear heavy footsteps from down the hall. The only reason as to why I could hear it was because I was the closest to the back door. I didn't know if anyone else heard it, but I looked through the little glass window on the door to see a man dressed in all black, However, I couldn't see his face as he was wearing a hoodie, but I instantly knew that he was up to no good. I didn't know how it happened, but he turned his head toward my direction and must have caught me looking at him from the window. He came right up to the door and started pounding on it. The whole class screamed and cried while the man kept trying to bust down the door. However, I knew there was a slim chance of that, as these doors are bulletproof and meant to be almost impossible to break open from one person. After several bangs and kicks to the door, he had finally given up and walked away. The principal then came back on and said it wasn't all clear. Now, this is where the disturbing part comes in. Apparently, a man had just broken into a nearby gas station and had shot the employee. I later learned that 4 people, 2 of them being teachers, had been shot. One of those teachers was Mr. Smith. I was told that he was escorted to the hospital by paramedics. However, he had unfortunately died in the hospital 2 days later due to loss of blood from the wound. I still have no idea if the man was ever caught or not, but I'd like to think he was. My condolences go out to Mr. Smith's family and relatives. It's really sad to know that such a great person with a happy personality got taken away from a school who adored him.
So my aunts were out of town for a couple of weeks, and they trusted me to be home alone. They didn't have anything to worry about. I'm not the partying type. I just like to go to work at a local store in my hometown, go out to eat, get cleaned up, and go to bed. That was my usual routine. That night I decided to stay in, and I ordered some pizza. I just didn't think that this much trouble could arise from something so mundane as ordering pizza. So I called in my order, and it didn't take very long for them to get to my house. I looked to make sure it was the delivery guy, and I was thankfully correct, though he was kinda creepy. I went out and signed for it. The man looked at me though, and began to ask me some creepy personal questions. Questions like, "How old are you?" and "Are you here alone?" I used to live around creepy guys like this when I was a child, and I knew how to answer them. I told him to just have a good night. I began to turn around with my order when I heard him say something else. "By the way, you look really good in your work uniform." I just pretended to smile, and I walked back into my house. I locked the door, and I had an anxiety attack. I didn't see him for a week after that incident, but when I was walking home, I saw him looking around the store, and I hurried out of there. But he followed me, and he said hi. I smiled and waved at him, then kept walking. Yet he kept following me, so I kept looking behind, keeping an eye on him. I walked into a gas station that I always stopped in after work. The manager there knew me very well. I told him the situation, and he told the man to leave me alone before we had a problem. But the manager of the gas station told me what the guy had said back to him, and that's the scariest part. The guy just smiled before walking away. He said, nothing to worry about. I'll have her alone soon." Luckily, nothing more has happened since then, but I have my guard up, ready for anything. At least, I hope I'm ready. My uncle is an ex-Marine and ex-police officer. When my uncle was still a police officer for Dublin, Ohio, this was one of his creepiest experiences. One night, my Uncle Tim and his partner Dave were working the 3rd shift, and as they were driving around the slums of Dublin, they got a call about a domestic disturbance about a half-mile up the road. When they get to the house, all the lights are off. My uncle and Dave are a little hesitant at first, but it's their job, and they got onto it anyways. Now with my uncle's ex-Marine body type and current police officer, he was a big guy, about 6'1" and 225 pounds, so he was bulky. When they get into the house, it reeks of rotten meat and marijuana, and there's bottles and trash all over the place. They assume it's a crack den. Dave hears a creak coming from upstairs and says he'll check it out. My uncle nods. Dave proceeds up the stairs and my uncle stays downstairs searching and flips on the light switch for the kitchen. When the light came on, he saw a body with a heroin needle sticking out of the arm. My uncle reports it, saying he's going to need some help with this. But then there's a gunshot from upstairs and a blood-curdling scream coming from Dave. My uncle runs upstairs to find a dead body on the floor and a bloody Dave. There's a woman in the back corner screaming at him. Backup arrives and takes the two bodies out, and the surviving lady was interviewed. Turned out to be their landlord, and the reason she was there sent chills down their spines. They had drugged, beat, and assaulted her, and they kept posting pictures of her on some deep website, and people would pay to come over and assault her as well. The reason my uncle was called there was because the neighbors down the street heard screaming and yelling and loud bangs, so they called the cops. My uncle was still a police officer for a few more years after that. He says he should have quit right after that night, but something about saving that girl was reward enough.
This happened pretty recent, about 3 weeks ago. Myself and 3 friends were hanging out at a shopping center one evening. We were messing around posting clips on TikTok. Then one of my friends started laughing, and I asked her what she was laughing at. She told me that guy behind us kept staring at me. When I turned around, it was some older guy just watching me. My friends thought it was hilarious, but I found it really weird. Then another one of my friends said she thinks that guy lives on her street, about a few houses down from her. She said that he actually follows her on TikTok. At that point, I quickly got my phone out to check if he was following me, and he was. I had to block him because he seemed a bit creepy. We went to get McDonald's before we went home, and I received a message on TikTok from someone. It was that guy who had been following us. His name was Greg, and he wrote, "Why did you block me?" with 2 emojis. One was a crying face, and the other one was an angry face. He had actually created another account that day in the shopping center. I blocked that account as well, hoping that would be the end of it. I didn't mention it to my friends this time, knowing they would just laugh. That night, I was up late and had Netflix on in the background as I was chatting with my friends on Facebook while scrolling through TikTok. I got up to use the bathroom, and when I returned, I had 3 messages from my friends, all saying the same thing. All were things like, "Who's in your room?" and "What's up with your last post?" I asked them what they were talking about, and they told me to check my TikTok, so I did. It was a clip of my bedroom. It was a clip of someone picking up my phone and recording the inside of my room. At that point, I heard a creaking. Then I heard a man's voice say, "Sorry. Please don't scream." And turned to see my closet door slightly open. I started to scream when the same guy who had been following us burst out of my closet and tried to cover my mouth. Thank God I screamed and it was enough for my parents to hear. They came upstairs and my dad tackled the guy to the floor. The police were called and he was arrested. We were informed that the guy had straight up admitted to stalking and breaking and entering. One of my friends pointed out, if I go back and look at the posts on TikTok from when we were in the shopping center, you can see Greg is in almost all of those pictures, somewhere in the background. I haven't heard what's going to happen to Greg yet, but I just hope he won't ever come near us again.